Hello everyone, I am Tacet and today I'm going to be going over the top 10 commons in Gems of War as well as some early game teams to use with them. So commons are the lowest rarity within Gems of War. They can be obtained from opening up the gold chest. Unlike many rarities in the game, the only place you can actually get these is from gold chests, though gold chests are the most common, so it is relatively easy to stock up on these quickly, as you can get them all via gold. You also get these from quite a few other things, such as from your guild, just during randomly in battles, as well as from tributes from your kingdoms, like right there. And most people, for the most part, would have basically every common by around their first month of playing the game. So a good majority of these, most people will be able to build into. So let's get into number 10, and that is the Golem. Oh wait, there's actually one other thing to mention. It is the cost of these things. One other thing to note about commons, which is one of the reasons why they are actually pretty nice to seek after. As you can see, that you can go over to their Ascension here and see to see what rarity it is. But anything that is marked with this base rarity common, they have the lowest trait stone cost as well as the lowest level up cost in the game. They cost less souls and less trait stones to be able to get every single one of their respective levels and their respective traits. This is useful because any of them that happen to have a good trait, such as for example this Golem, is the cheapest troop currently in the game to be able to get stone skin. Because it's a common, it's really easy to get, and it is generally desired as one of your really first defensive troops. So every single one of these are going to be super easy to level as well as get their traits on, so do keep that in mind. Anyways, into the first one, it is of course Golem. Main reason for this, as I kind of already just mentioned, it has stone skin, it has inscribed, which is basically useless later on in the game, but early on, that's basically a mitigation to spells. There's currently not really anything in the game that can mitigate spells for the most part. Inscribed can, and early on in the game it has a really big impact. Because every single time anything on the enemy casts, you end up getting 1 armor, and if it happens a couple times, their damage is low enough that you'll be able to get a small amount of the damage they do to you reduced from their abilities. He also has a flat 50% rate of skulls that get hit against him, just get completely cut down, and he has some extra mana. Anything with stone skin and any link is generally pretty desired on a team. Other than that, we just put a Deep Roar Ranger Rock Spirit. This is a pretty decent triple combo to use early on in the game, simply with a green yellow banner to help get the Ranger up a little bit quicker. So on to didn't even go over his ability. That would kind of be helpful. And as far as his ability, it is a single explode that can be used for board control, and it reduces all of the enemy's armor. With a team setup like this, the thing you'd want to do is try getting the Golem up immediately, then basically do a Deep Roar into a Golem into the Ranger plus Rock Spirit is the combo you would want to do. So first, second, and then get both of those down, and that would almost be the match because the armor reduction into both of their really high damage off their abilities, they both hit randomly split among enemies, and you'd pretty much be able to get the kill. And Rock Spirit and the Golem both boost ratio based on how many browns it ends up destroying, so you'll end up getting quite a bit of value out of that Deep Roar cast. Next up, speaking of Deep Roar, we have Rockworm for number 9. Had to include Rockworm. He is a classic. Maybe not the absolute most ideal option these days. There kind of are better stuff, but as an early game player, 1 Deep Roar plus triple Rockworm is pretty easy to obtain, especially since once you upgrade one troop of a type, for example this common, once you get them maxed, every single Rockworm copy you ever have will be maxed. So you could put 3 and 4 of them on a team, and it won't cost you any extra than if you only had 1 of them on the team. So do keep that in mind. Just make sure if you do go and ascend, never disenchant your extra copies, but always before Mythic. But always make sure you throw them into Ascension. Ascension makes it so you can level them up further. And one thing to note about Ascension is don't over ascend sometimes, because let's say you have this at common. You have 5 copies of him, you can then make him into a rare. Or actually, you would need 6 copies because you need 1 remaining. So let's say you have 6 copies of him, you make him into a rare. Boom, there you go. But now you only have 1 copy of Rockworm, so if you wanted to do a triple team, you wouldn't be able to then. So make sure when you are ascending troops, don't disenchant them. But when you do ascend your troops to make them higher levels, or so that you can upgrade them into higher levels, make sure you do not get rid of more than you actually need. Because if you need like 2 of them for a team or 3 of them of a team and you only have 1, then you won't be able to create it. But essentially, same thing. Deep Boar creates the browns, Rockworms creates brown. You can basically just get a huge amount of browns, keep hitting the enemy from the back, and just keep working your way from the bottom and just completely destroy them from their back line. Next up, we have a Leshy, a little bit of an odd troop. He has a negative/positive effect of entangling all allies and enemies. Of course, the negative part of that being entangling all allies. This is technically not a bad thing in some situations. There are 2 times when entangling your entire team would actually be beneficial, as odd as that may seem. It is if the enemy has a bunch of attack reduction. While you are in entangled state, you will not be able to lose attack value. So if they have something that's going to be able to reduce your attack, let's say by 10, and you are entangled, it would not reduce the attack. Anything that has its entangle on it will not be able to raise or lose attack. The other feature that it would kind of have is if the enemy has something that makes you do damage to yourself based on your attack value. This would be something like a Wisp, or if they have a Lamia, these troops have Charm, which will cause your troop to do its attack value to the troops above and below it. But if it's entangled, then that troop can't do anything to you. And of course, the benefit of having the entire enemy team entangled would be they can't hit you with their skulls, so you don't need to worry about skull spam, skull pokes, or anything of the such. He also destroys all green, which can give you a decent amount of green into whatever troop you choose. And Cockroaches is mainly here for a nice mana drain, as well as the brown that it ends up generating. And in the theme of that one drain, we also have a Murline for some silence that will prevent the enemy from casting for a short period of time, as well as preventing them from accumulating mana, and Swamp Lash just for the triple damage off of the enemies. Swamp Lash is a little bit of a higher rarity, though you could put that with just about any useful green troop right there to utilize the green you get off the Leshy. It doesn't have to be that specific troop. Next up, Wraith. This, in the past, used to be probably number 3, number 2, or even number 1 on this list. He's quite a bit lower now, mainly because of the nerf that Death Touch has. He's still really powerful in that he has 2 on-skull effects. One is he places Death Mark, and the other is he places Freeze. These are 2 of the strongest status effects in the game. So they are really potent. The fact that he can place both of them simply by taking a skull once he gets fully traded, which of course it's common, so it is really easy to get it fully traded. So yeah, Death Mark, it gives a 10% chance each turn that the enemy will die, though it does have a 1-turn delay. Used to have a 0-turn delay, used to have a 2-turn delay. It is currently the in-between of a 1. One thing to know about this is don't keep spamming it against the enemy. There's still a weird mechanic with Death Touch, which is one of the reasons why he's not so far up on this list, that if you keep applying Death Touch back to back, it will keep reapplying the 1-turn delay. So basically what you want to do is hit something with this and then don't hit them until their Death Touch either kills them or it cleanses naturally, and then just take another skull and then do it. Don't keep taking skulls or it's going to keep adding 1-turn delays to them. Not to mention his already good traits, he also has a decent ability. He either steals life, meaning he does true damage, which means he just does damage to HP, as well as he gets to keep that life. So if he does 21 to an enemy like ours will do, he'll do 21 HP damage as well as gain 21 life himself. Or it will steal all their mana. Steal is different than draining it. When he steals it, he actually gets to keep all of it. So if the enemy has 7 or more mana, he will literally gain all of his mana back to be able to recast it again. Really potent, very luck based, but if it does exactly what you want, and you happen to get lucky enough, it is a very potent common. In this team, we're just using it with another mana drain, and the rest of the team is simply true damage. Mist Stalker to hit their weakest with true damage, also really good with the boost ratio off the magic, and Spirit Fox for, again, another mana drain, and again, more true damage. On to number 6. We have ourselves the Villager, one of the tankiest common, if not the tankiest common, even though he doesn't have any skull mitigation. He can transform into a werewolf. While you won't be able to upgrade werewolf immediately, you might not even have it, as it's a higher rarity troop, but this thing is only a common. Basically, he has 2 forms. He has this normal form, and he has the werewolf form. As I mentioned, you probably won't have the werewolf side, but it basically will allow you to keep a really strong troop constantly in your first slot. Essentially, what it will do whenever you convert, or transform, I should say, yourself, is every single transforms your character back into a fully statted version of whatever transform is. So he'll transform, go into a werewolf with no stats effects or anything against him. So let's say, for example, we have this villager. He goes down to 5 HP, he's about to die. We can just convert or transform him into a werewolf, and then boom. He now is a fully max, basically start of battle werewolf. And then if he does it again, boom, he'll come right back to these exact stats with no ailments, no death mark, no freeze, no nothing on him, even if he had it applied to him. So really, really good for just keeping a frontline tank to make sure the skulls of the enemy team don't really matter. On top of that, both the forms have a convert. With him, he gets to convert all yellow gems to brown, and in the other form, you get to transform all blues to purple, as well as do a minor amount of damage. So you just keep switching back and forth, works out really nice, and he also gets stealthy, which will help make sure that you can't really target him immediately, so he can get the transforms back and forth. Apothecary is just here for brown mana. Rock Spirit for the same thing earlier. Whenever you'd have a lot of brown on the board, you can use him for really high damage, particularly in early game. And Goblin Rocket's basically just here for the board control and his automatic extra turn. Next up, we have ourselves the Snowy Owl. There are so many weird teams that you can make with this that are really potent. It destroys all purples from the board and then creates 7 gems of a chosen color. While 7 gems isn't a excessively high amount of gems, the fact that you're completely removing an entire color from the board makes it a lot likelier that it will actually hit its extra turn to the board. This is also a really great mana generator, not only in that it can destroy all purple for you, but that it also has a magic link that increases the amount of purple you gain. Do keep in mind that this destroy does not actually increase with the magic link. Magic link only applies when you actually swipe the gems, whereas destroying them will just give a 1 mana per purple. So if there's 8 purple, you just get 8 purple mana. The magic link has no effect in raising it. But it works out really good. We'll just use this to get up something like a Sunbird, which also works slightly similarly to a Villager in that it keeps us coming back and back and back, coming with no ailments, coming back at normal stats, and you can just use it as a frontline tank. And the Alchemist Hellcat is just here to loop. A Hellcat is a bit of a higher rarity troop that you may not have, though you can try replacing it with a Banshee. Won't be as efficient because it doesn't have as many transforms as a Hellcat, but it is a much lower rarity that will serve a similar purpose onto the team. Onto number 4, we have the Bomba. Oh, I love this troop. So Deep Borer Bomba. Deep Borer is coming into a lot of these actually. But Deep Borer Bomba, really, really powerful troop. It kills itself, but it has one of the highest AoE damages in the entire game, surprisingly, as a common. But yeah, has a relatively small amount of initial damage, but it has a boost ratio based on how much armor it has at a 2-to-1 ratio, and since it's hitting all enemies, you get a lot of value out of that. You can see in mine, it's actually doing 26 additional damage, and that 26 is to every single enemy, so that's 104 damage right there, just in the boost ratio, not even counting his normal amount of damage on his ability, and that can stack even higher if you were to use it in a team that actually raises his armor in some way. Traits are basically useless, but you can essentially just cast 2 of these, and in many battles that will almost wipe the enemy. Here we just have a hero using Black Manacles. A cheaper early game option would be getting the War and Peace weapon, which you can obtain from this kingdom over here, Kazale. After you've completed some of Adana, I believe you can then go to Kazale, do the bonus quest line at the end of it, and then get yourself a War and Peace weapon, which is essentially the same thing as the Black Manacle, just slightly weaker, but way easier to obtain. Ideally, you'd be using this with fully traded Mechanist class, but in early game, you probably wouldn't be able to do that. So it wouldn't really matter too much if you have it or not. Just makes the game go on a little bit longer not having it. But simply one nice Deep Borer cast into the double Bomba would be enough to get everything going. On to number 3, we have ourselves the Direwolf. Surprisingly, as a common, he is currently the best Hunter's Mark in the entire game. The main reason for this is he gets such a ridiculously good extra turn. All he needs is 13 or more green on the board to be able to get his extra turn. This is pretty easy to do. Troops that you would use to do this are things like Dryad, Green Seer, and Forest Troll. Green Seer and Forest Troll are epic, so they're a little bit harder to get, but you can simply just use a Dryad, which most people have. It's only a rare, gives a little bit of life heal, gives a little bit of life increase, ends up giving you a barrier, and it creates some greens that will hold down the 13 plus that it needs to extra turn. Really nice about it, since it can keep poking with damage with extra turns, it entangles, and it places Hunter's Mark. One other thing to note is it has an entrapment trait, which makes it do twice as much damage to things that are entangled, and this does indeed stack with Hunter's Mark, so you would actually do 4 times as much skull damage, which is enough probably in early game to one-shot most everything that you'll ever be facing, so that's pretty nice. You can see even mine right here with 4 times damage would be doing a total of 108 damage per skull poke, which this late in the game is normally enough to kill. There are quite a few battles that it wouldn't be able to, but still, 1 or 2 shot most of the time. Very, very potent. Boar Rider here is just in case you don't one shot, so you can get that frontline damage to kill them out. Automatically extra turns as well. Dryad here, as I mentioned, is here mainly for the greens, as well as to keep Direwolf alive. And even more so to keep Direwolf alive, we get a full heal, a life gain, attack increase, and a cleanse on whatever target we choose, which most often than not in this particular team will be on the Direwolf to make sure he doesn't die. Direwolf generally needs assistance to stay alive. The only thing he really has to keep himself alive is agile at a 20% skull dodge, so giving it these kind of heals will make sure that he hopefully never goes down. Skull spam is about the only thing that's really going to take him down with that much healing. Next up, we have the wonderful Dwarven Gates. These things are absolutely insane. Honestly, I don't know how they haven't nerfed this yet. Please don't nerf them. They're actually amazing. They are really, really, really good. They gain a lot of armor. That alone would be good enough, almost. Then they boost by dwarven allies, and since this does indeed count as a dwarf, you'd be able to get even more boost ratio, and if you're using both of them, you get both their boosts. And then all other allies gain barriers, so everything except himself, and on top of that, it also gains 5 mana to everything else. So essentially, what you can do here is cast a Dwarven Gate into a Dwarven Gate. Boom, you got Valkyrie to full mana. Do it again. Boom, you got back to Dwarven Gate. And then you have your other mana, or your other troop in last slot that now has 10 mana, plus possibly more if it's a blue troop that got extra from the Valkyrie. You can use basically anything in the entire game in last slot. That is a really solid damage source. One slightly bad thing about this team in particular is that whatever your last slot is basically the only damage source you have. But assuming it doesn't die to a Kraken or some other related troop, you're pretty much good to go. If you need to for safety, you can always switch the two. And I just have Tesla here as it's my personal preference because it's boost based on armor in the entire game. And since you have Dwarven Gates that are not only giving you barriers to make sure you don't get hit, but are also gaining more armor, which just make Tesla stronger and stronger, which is really nice. But as I mentioned, you can use basically anything here. Ideally, it would be a really high damaging blue troop, but you can use absolutely any troop here, even if it's not blue, simply because the Dwarven Gates will keep giving it basically 10 mana, 5 each, and you just get both of them. Valkyrie, boom, and Valkyrie of course has that 10 mana too, so it's really easy to keep looping them and just keeping yourself alive since you just get so much barrier I didn't really mention, but it negates a complete instance of damage. So every single one of these barriers, regardless if they hit you for a 5 or 500, you will not take any damage from it as long as it's only one particular hit. And finally, for number 1, this is a more recent troop. Most of you probably already know what it is by the fact that it's omitted. One thing that I did omit that I just realized now, I forgot to include Goblin on here. Goblin's really good with 4x Goblins if you want to do that. I believe the proper team these days is Boar Rider, Goblin Rocket, Goblin Shaman, and either a Hobgoblin or a Goblin in last slot, something along those lines. But anyways, for number 1, we have ourselves the Firebomb. Yes, this thing is basically a reverse Bombot in that it doesn't... Bombot is high damage, low mana generation, whereas a Firebomb is high mana generation, low damage. So the exact opposite of it. Explodes 4 red gems and deals damage to a random enemy and then destroys itself. A really high liability since of course it just destroys itself. But one thing to really note about this is it is currently the only common in the game with Empowered. Scale Guard used to also have Empowered, but they changed it to 75% starting mana, so now he is indeed the only common with Empowered. And generally, every single troop in the game, with a few exceptions, are all good if they have Empowered, and Firebomb is no exception whatsoever. This is a lot more mana generation than it may seem. 4 explosions, particularly in early game, is a lot of mana. That is going to be around 20-ish, not even counting the cascades that you'll end up getting from it. So you can get some really, really good value. And he starts with it, so you get that immediately. I like running it with Sunbird. I also put a Rowan in here because some of the other options that you may need for these kind of teams are a little bit more expensive. You can do Goblin Rockets, a few other things, but a Rowan you can get for free simply from completing out the Forest of Thorns Kingdom. Even though she is an epic, you can just get her for free at the end of that quest line, which will take like 1 hour or less. So pretty nice to have. Sunbird's an ultra rare. You just throw that down with a lot of AoE damage that it does. The Fire Bombs will basically get both of them to full mana. Throw a Sunbird, throw a Rowan, boom, you just won the battle. And yes, that are basically all of the really good commons in Gems of War. Definitely don't underestimate them. There are commons in this game that are better than some of the other rarities. There's commons that are even better than things that are legend and mythic. There are many options. I sometimes go with Firebomb, sometimes go with those gates. They are definitely not to be underestimated. Just because they are common doesn't necessarily mean that they are useless, that is for sure. And not to mention, you can ascend them and get them to the same level as you would any other troop. As you can see, this one's only at level 17 right now, but every single common in the game can be made to be all the way up to level 20 once you upgrade it to Mythic with enough extra copies of it, making it essentially just like every other similar troop. But anyways, guys, that will wrap it up for this video. If you still have any other questions about Gems of War or anything else in general, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a wonderful day.